All right, hopefully with this one, excuse me, it'll work a little bit better. That way the music, because metal generally, naturally, is a bit of a loud form of music. So, which is what I had, I think my biggest problem with the last program in terms of the technical problems. So I had to lower volume a little bit, but I thought it worked out pretty well. The program worked out pretty well for a beginning. Went pretty good, so I didn't want to get rid of that. Especially, it was an hour and a half of me talking about stuff, and my notes here really helped me pretty well staying on topic and get through in a much better fashion. But especially for the outro in the last one was a little too loud, so I'm hoping for this one. I think for this one I have it set up really well to where it's not going to be as loud. These are kinks, working on that kind of stuff. But I'll get through it. I actually wasn't planning exactly on doing one today, but I saw some things. And I've got some time right now to just, talk. And maybe a lot of you guys have some time to do a lot of thinking and listening. Maybe I can accompany you and help you sort through thoughts and stuff like that. That's kind of what I like to do. I still intend to do programs later on like doing stuff in Romans. I'm kind of putting together a little series I want to publish on this program in a series of Romans, because this is still very much a theological program. It's really not a newscast. It's just I'm blending different things in there, just for things that have to deal with theology, culture, and politics, and just life in general is really kind of where I'm aiming. So I'm trying to put in a couple of different things, but not, you don't want to be too broad, because you just don't have an identity at that point. And very few programs work well in doing that. I think one of those is Joe Rogan's program, because I think Joe Rogan's he really was a pioneer of podcasting. So he's kind of started its popularity, or helped make it really popular, and that's really why he's extremely popular, because he was one of the first ones. It really had nothing to do with his identity, exactly what he wanted to talk about. It's just talking about stuff. That's what he talks about. A lot of it to me is a little boring, but I do listen to some interesting stuff that he talks about. But anyways, I wanted to talk about a couple things that I have here. Hopefully this one's not going to be as long as the last one. It shouldn't be. I don't exactly see why, but things have been happening in the news. Yes, things related to coronavirus, but again, I'm hoping by the end of this you'll stick around for the end, because I think I've been learning something really cool and positive. And by the way, I want to make it a thing to close out each program with some kind of biblical message. That's what I want to do at the end of each of these. And I intended to, I kind of started that with the last one, and I intend to continue doing that one today. So, starting out, and I'll talk about the context of why I found myself outside reading this morning. After this, when I'm closing the program out, that's part of my message towards the end. So, guys, stick around for that. But what I want to talk about right now is just history. Yeah, just talking about history. History has been a subject that for the last year or so, has just rapidly become something that I'm very passionate about. Just growing more and more interested in it. If you watched the program yesterday, I kind of dived into it a little bit, because history can teach us a lot. It really can. There's so much to learn from it. And right now, given the amount of time a lot of us have, there's excellent opportunity right there to learn about history. And I'm going to go to an interesting area to make this point. I'm a World War II nerd. I love finding stuff on World War II and just watching documentaries and stuff, and it's been something that just one of those things I love. I'm really fascinated with. Like the Vietnam War, I'm not really all that into that. Pretty much any other war in our 20th and 21st century context, I'm not really all that interested in. World War II, man, for some reason, I'm just drawn to it and everything that took place there. But growing up, for the most part, I always heard about the American and the Allied side of things, with possible exception of, Russia, because Russia was kind of sort of an ally. It was the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing that we had with Russia, which is no surprise then why our relationship with Russia deteriorated pretty substantially right after that. But so but it was always the American side of things that I always learned about. It was never really the German side of things. Well, I've been learning a little bit more about the German side of things, and I am German. I'm part German. And I don't know how I ended up doing this. I think it was just because I was just always curious about when you see the Nazi rallies, the pictures of the Nazi rallies. I mean, just this big old grand place, and you're like, man, where in the world did they find the space to do something like that? I mean, whew. So I kind of was looking around for it, I think, and I stumbled across something really interesting. So if you were to go to, and I have some of this already sort of prepared. I was doing a little bit on this, a little research on this stuff. Let's see here. Let's just pull up this image right here. That's not gonna work. Oy. There is a, let me see here. Luitpolding, or Luitpolding. I'm not familiar with the German, accents, stuff like that, so I probably butchered that horribly. It's in Nuremberg. Luitpolding in Nuremberg is a park. If you go to it on Google Earth, you will find this park called Luitpolding. Now, why is that interesting? What's so interesting about a park in the middle? It's just a open land with some trees and a walkway. Just a little walkway, and it's just. But there's especially right in the center, there's just open land, and surrounded by trees. But so why is a park there in Luitpolding fascinating or interesting? An interesting area to go see, more interesting than most parks that you might go. Your average state park that's just sitting right across the street or down the road or something like that. Why is this one really interesting? This is where all those pictures are, where you see the big old Nazi rallies and stuff like that, with the big old crowds, and then that long sort of walkway, and then they have the big flags set up, and then there's the up on the top. It had a very high churchman almost sense of an appearance, almost you could say a Romanesque sort of thing. It's a very majestic kind of thing, you might say. That's where all of those rallies were held. And if you go to that place today, there's none of that stuff there. It's all gone. It was completely obliterated. I mean, the entire park was just rolled over and turned into a normal park. And this was part of Germany's purge of everything related to Nazism after the regime fell. You could say this is part of Germany's penance to the world for what it did to the world. You might say that. You might almost say that this was the 20th century version of virtue signaling. Just destroying all this stuff. Now, not everything there is gone. What's it called? I want to make sure I get some of these mostly right. They have what is called the Congress Hall. I believe there's a German way of saying it that I'm not going to really try to butcher. Maybe let's give it a shot. Congressale. That sounds That doesn't sound German, but I probably butchered it again. But I never really truly embraced my German side as well as my Mexican side, even though I'm more fascinated with my German side. One of my great regrets with my grandma, she was German, and she was alive, and she was in Europe during World War II. Is one of my biggest regrets is not really learning more about German from her. I do feel really that's just a stupid thing for me to do. But so I never really got into that part of my heritage and stuff like that. But anyways, that building is still there. It was eventually meant to be where the German Congress was going to be. It was never finished. I think it did. I guess the war came crumbling down on Hitler by then, before they could ever really finish it. So it's just sort of, it still looks really impressive given it's unfinished. But even that has pretty much been abandoned. I mean, if you go to the courtyard, it's very clear. I mean, it almost looks like an abandoned train yard. It just so much overgrowth. The grounds are all just rotted away. It's just, there's only a small portion of the building still being used in Germany. So that's pretty much it. But other than that, that entire area has been almost entirely, except for a few small little areas, been almost entirely demolished. Now, if you go up to where, again, have you seen the footage of Hitler when he's just kind of on his vacations on this almost like castle-like area, just this big mansion-like building overlooking these mountains and stuff like that? Well, that was, let me make sure I get it pulled up here. That was his home called the Berghof. It was in Obersalzberg of the Bavarian Alps. So that's kind of, I was looking it up this morning. That's kind of like south east-ish. It's right on the Austrian border with Germany. That's where that was located. Now I'm using that word. I'm saying it in the past tense, was, because the Berghof is no longer there. It's gone. It was, I believe, it was damaged in World War II. It was bombed, I believe, and then, well, no, that way, I think I got that wrong. I think what happened was when the Allies were coming into that area, because again, Hitler was in Berlin, and he died in Berlin. So everything was crumbling down for Nazi Germany, and I believe the SS or the Nazis there basically attempted to burn down the building. Didn't necessarily succeed, but eventually it was blown to bits after the war. And I'm assuming that's an attempt to get rid of all traces of Hitler. They want to just remove him completely from their history. And since the Berghof was his home, that's an obvious prime suspect. So they blew it all up. So there's really nothing left of the Berghof. Now, when I was looking into a lot of these things, and again, I haven't looked in depth into a lot of these things, so I may have gotten a few things wrong there. The most obvious of them is butchering names. But to me, it's a tragic thing that these things have been completely removed. Now, why say that? I mean, Chase, what are you saying? Are you saying that, you want Nazi Germany back? No, of course not. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is history in those buildings, even if it was evil history. It was a dark time in Germany's past, no question. But it was part of its history. And Germany, in its attempt to purge itself from what is, in fact, its history, you just can't erase history. It's settled. It's in the past. It's there. But no matter what its attempts, it can't really erase history. What you can do is you can try to erase history, remove all of its traces, And as a result, not teach your people to appreciate what history teaches us, and subject your further generations to repeat the mistakes of the past. It's one thing to put history in the past. It's another thing to try and erase it altogether, because that sets yourself up to be doomed later on. You and your generations, the people that follow you. I think it would have been wonderful for the sake of history to have. I mean, obviously in World War II, when you got the Nazis, trying to destroy it, whatever, probably because they don't want to, maybe theorizing the humiliation of having the Allies take it over and just say, look at us, we're at the Berghof, oh yeah, look at that kind of stuff like that. I don't think they didn't succeed in destroying the whole thing, but because I think the Allies got in there anyway, they sacked the place. So that's one thing. Obviously, you're in sort of the heat of the moment, history kind of thing like that. Well, I mean, heat of the moment, you're in the war, and so you do something like that. That stuff happens. I get that. But later on, when the building didn't completely go down, just blow it up anyway, I wish that didn't happen. Even though I understand why they did it. But so I guess the point I'm saying here is, it'd be nice, it'd be really cool to have rebuilt the Berghof and turn it into a museum. I think you could do it. I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't do it. I'm sure you have plenty of photo evidence to do a really good. I mean, we had no photo evidence of the Second Temple, and we pretty much rebuilt that in model forms and stuff like that. So you should be able to do this when you got pictures, and it was far, closer to us than the Second Temple was. Anyways, to have turned it into a museum and shown people around, and so they could see what it was like, and as best as we can possibly do to go back in time into those moments of history, because things like that teach us things. They put things in perspective for us, and that's good for people. And again, going back to that park where the Nazi rallies were held, I believe 6 were held, and all your numerologists are going to go, oh, 6, 6, 6, 6, and all this stuff, and probably not anymore, because obviously the world didn't end with Hitler. So there you go. Man, my hair is bugging me. Sorry. Okay. So, but going back to that park, the entire place has basically been turned into a carnival, and a carnival that's probably not up and running right now with the coronavirus going. But I wish that much of that was preserved, to show people they can get really close to just walking into the past and seeing what it was like. Now, of course, you can take them to the locations and they can sort of envision it themselves, but I think it's great if you can remove from people as much of the burden of having to envision it as you possibly can, and you can do that by keeping at least the buildings and the structures intact, so they don't have to imagine all that stuff. They can do the rest. That reality would do it, most of that for them, and then they can fill in the blanks themselves in that way. But what that represents, the point here is, what that represents is an attempt to correct the past in a way that it shouldn't be done, at least in my opinion. I don't think it should be done that way. You correct the past by, first of all, never forgetting your past, never destroying it. You can't remove what's part of German history any more than we in America can remove what's part of American history, the slavery here in America. All the stuff about slavery, all the artifacts of slavery that we have, I would say keep them and put them in a museum, so that we can show people these things and we can learn from these things, to be given perspective. I mean, because it's one thing for me to sit here and to look at the pictures on the web and read about it and even see video footage of it. What's it like to go there, though? I mean, that's going to really have an impact on you. It's like when I went to go see the Grand Canyon. You know, I had seen for years pictures of this thing, and I'd tell you, nothing compares to having seen it with your own eyes. That's when you really get perspective. I think that human experience really adds an element that it just cannot be replaced, and we cannot, in our attempts to correct and to redeem history, destroy what we're trying to redeem. Because if you destroy it, there's nothing to redeem anyway. So redeeming history requires acknowledging that it's there, and that's one of the reasons why studying history is really important, and not studying it to do any kinds of historical revisionism, to say I want to cram my worldview into time and space, and my heroes and stuff like that, and so I've got to take this out, put this in, and reconstruct this a little bit and tweak all that. No, learning history for the sake of what history is. I mean, that's one of the things I'm doing with church history right now. With this thing. This is Nick Needham's 2,000 Years of Christ's Power. This is Volume 1, The Age of the Early Church Fathers. Getting towards the center of this, in the middle of it, but I'll read into that. And my other two are, let's see if I can point this with the camera. Those two white books right there, those are the other two volumes. I believe there's a fourth volume, and that's sort of like the 20th century up to our day, but I don't have that one. That's okay. I can get that eventually, but I have this one. The next one is going to be the Middle Ages, and after that it's going to be the Renaissance and the Reformation. Studying that history has been extremely insightful. Now obviously these are surveys. This isn't like an in-depth thing, but it's much more in-depth than most of the stuff I've read so far. So it's very helpful. I've learned a lot in reading these that I didn't get in a lot of other books. Not to say that those are bad, but this goes into a little bit more detail. Oh, excuse me. But it's really important that we don't forget our past. I also have this here too, sitting here, a little pocket constitution. My mom gave this to me yesterday. So anyways, kind of moving on. So I want to get into a little bit of news here, and it is related to what I was just talking about, history. You have right now, I just saw this article on the Daily Wire. This week, a pastor was arrested and charged with criminal offenses for holding a worship service. Let us note that this event occurred not in North Korea. So this is Matt Walsh. This is to add, sort of shock and drama to it. That's kind of what this is meant to do. Let us note that this event occurred not in North Korea or Saudi Arabia, but the United States of America. Pastor Rodney Howard Brown of Revival International Ministries turned himself into authorities after leading his congregation in Sunday worship, which put him in violation of his county's stay-at-home order. He has it in quotes. Hillsborough County, County in Florida, like many other states and localities across the country, has forcibly shut down all establishments that it has deemed non-essential. As far as I know, no government at any level, anywhere in the nation has deigned to label churches essential. Our founding fathers, who gave the right to assemble and the rights to practice religion pride of place, I think it meant religious pride of place in the Bill of Rights, seemed to have disagreed. Maybe it's just me, but that sentence was a little tough to read. But in these times, we are not subject to the opinions of the founding fathers, or even the legal document they wrote. We have entered a point in our history where governors, mayors, and local county boards can come up with any rule they like, outlaw whatever behavior they don't like, and enforce their edicts at gunpoint. But the question in this new system, I have been repeatedly informed, is to wish death on our nation's elderly population. I can sort of relate to that last sentence for sure. I'm not going to read too far into this this article, because I think he makes a good point. So right now what you have happening, and now another pastor in Florida was arrested, a guy named Kerry Gordon, sorry, in Florida. This was in Tampa. He was arrested for doing the same thing. Even though Steve Dace posted this, according to Kerry Gordon, his church had taken all the necessary precautions, 6 feet from each other, kind of thing like that, and hand sanitizers and all this kind of stuff. He says he did more than most people have been doing. So he's been following all the rules, in other words, and still got arrested. But I want to go back to the article by Walsh, Hillsborough County, in Florida. Gosh, I can't get that right. Excuse me. Our founding fathers, who gave the right to assemble and the right to practice religion, pride of place. It says religion, pride of place. In the Bill of Rights, seems to have disagreed. But in these times, we are not subject to the opinion of the founding fathers or even the legal document they wrote. So I think a good thing to do at this point is to ask, what would the founding fathers think of this? Because obviously, if you're thinking about, if you're actually thinking, making some attempt to think rationally and attempt to understand the situation, you have to be considering the possibility, at least, that this is a violation of our rights. You have to, and I think if you don't struggle with that, you're on one side of this and imbalanced. And I'm not saying that you have to come out the end of the tunnel agreeing with me here. What I'm saying is, can't you at least admit that this is a difficult situation we're in? We are basically, violating people's rights to assemble. And at that point, I think you would have to say, yes, Chase, but. And that's the thing here. That's the thing that gets me. I understand, like I said in my last program, I totally get the justification for a lot of my friends and those on the side that's sort of panicking about this thing. I understand that. I get that. Well, what Matt Walsh is pointing out here, I'm not a big fan of Matt Walsh, in all due respect, but he does say some right things, and he makes a good point here. We are at a point right now, like it or not, where we're basically putting the Constitution on the sidelines for something like this, for the sake of safety, surviving, that kind of stuff. That's what we're doing. I mean, I just don't see any way around that. I see you having to admit, yes, the Constitution has these rights and stuff like that, but Chase, we got a crisis on our hands. And that's the point I was making in my last program. Principles are there for a reason. Creeds are there for a reason. They're there to make sure that, especially when crap hits the fan, you have a guideline of how to react to it. What's the point of those principles if, when the rubber meets the road, we just go, yeah, it's gonna have to, not really, kind of thing like that. I mean, they're pointless. They're completely worthless. And again, I'm hearing the objections. Chase, people are dying, all this stuff. I mean, I just don't know how to. It's like Dr. White said, you just can't reason with people who are panicking. No matter what you say, it's just that whole people are dying. That's just what you do when you're panicked. That's your presupposition. That's your absolute right there. And everything is to be brought into subjection to that. And so what kind of, again, I ask, what kind of precedent are we setting here by going down this road? You can say, Chase, you know, right now, for the safety of everyone else, we need to make sure everybody stays indoors. You can say that, and you know, maybe that makes sense. You know, I get it. But the precedent that you're setting for later on down the road, what are you setting? Are you not opening up a Pandora's box for something far worse down the road by going this route? And see, that's the point of creeds. That's the point of principles. Is to make sure that when crap hits the fan, we know how to respond accordingly. To do, it is just like when we come to the doctrine of the Trinity, the Orthodox definition. As I often try to tell people, orthodoxy and doctrine is not there so much to. I mean, it is in a sense to train you in the way that's right, but more than that. It was developed to, if you look into the historical aspect of it, the things like the language of the Trinity was actually developed to make sure you don't go out of bounds. That's really what it was like. It's the training wheels on a bike. So what do the training wheels teach you how to ride a bike? They don't teach you. They don't really teach you how to ride the bike. Do the floaties teach you how to swim? Not really. The training wheels just keep you from constantly falling off your bike while you're trying to learn how to balance and stuff like that, how to use how to use the functions of the bike. Floaties keep you from drowning so you can learn how to swim and eventually not have to use the floaties anymore. That's really what they're there for. And it's the same thing, really the same thing with doctrine. It's like the training wheels. It's like the floaties, and it's the same thing with principles. They're the floaties that keep you from completely drowning. They keep you afloat. When things go bad and we just throw all of that out to the wind, we have proven once and for all that they're just worthless. They're just completely meaningless. If you abandon them once, you'll just do it again. I mean, come on, guys. You, as Christians who believe in, you know, the sinfulness of man, we should know more than anybody how man loves to just creep his idols in further and further. What did John Calvin say? That the human heart is a constant factory of idols. The more you give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. He's just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. So you can't tell me that this isn't going to end up in a bad place eventually. History is not on your side here. And again, so what's the response then? Well, Chase, what do you want to do? Well, I think I've been sort of clear about what I think we should do. First trying to provide the data that, that this thing isn't as nuclear holocaust as we're making it out to be. At the same time, that doesn't mean we don't take it seriously. That doesn't mean that it's a complete and total conspiracy theory. People are, making fun of folks like me and calling us conspiracy theorists. And again, I just think that sort of demonstrates not thinking through the whole thing. Because I've never said that the actual coronavirus itself was a conspiracy theory. I'm talking about the people who are using its reality, manipulating its reality, and making it worse than it actually is for some kind of political gain. That's not unusual at all. That happens all the time. It's not unusual for the media to take something trivial and make a big deal about it. Not unusual at all. Look at the Russia stuff that had been happening in the past couple of years. The media ran a freaking circus on that thing for 2 years, and we were all the whole entire time we're going, this is just bogus, crazy stupidness. Come on, man! Look at this media. I mean, who can trust these guys? But if all you're doing is just watching those media, because I get, like I said, I get my news from different outlets. CNN is one of them. And if all I was doing was paying attention to CNN, I would be thinking that Trump was like the traitor of all traitors, a treasonous Russian asset. But I don't get my whole news from CNN. I get my news from a lot of other places that are like, when I see the CNN stuff coming up, I see these other places that are saying this, and I'm like, oh, that probably explains the stuff that CNN left out. And all of a sudden, it's not that bad. So, you know, the truth, the real truth is that Trump made a couple of mistakes, obviously. But what the media does is they take that little truth and they blow it way out of proportion, and they take it to degrees that are completely unnecessary. So it's not unusual at all. So I just don't understand where a lot of that conspiracy theory accusation is coming from. There's nothing tinfoil hat about the things I've been saying. I'm giving you the research too. Here it is. Check it out. You can check it on my last program. Somewhere about like 45 minutes in, I started talking about some of the data. But we are approaching dangerous grounds again with this stuff. With, you know, it's a heavy thing on my heart here to my good brother in the Lord who's helps me support this program, Chris New. I saw one of his posts talking. It was a warning sent out to Facebook. People who will be fined if they are found out and about, you know, stuff in, I believe, in Virginia, and quite a bit of money, $5,000 at least, something like that, if they're found wandering about. And Chris is promoting this, saying, "Stay inside, guys. Just stay home. Just stay home." I just cannot abide that. I can't. Constitutional grounds cannot allow me to abide that rule. I just can't do it. Again, I had to just point out the precedent that we're setting here is extremely dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. I just want to point us to that. Now, having said all that, because I think I've said most of everything in my last program and stuff like that, so you can go check that out. Having said all that, I want to close here with a message. You know, for all you guys who are probably hating me right now for calling me out for panicking, well, maybe I can win you back with a little message here. Let me first start by saying that God is strange. He is really strange. Not in a bad way, strange in a good way. Strange in a just a wonderful, blessed way. Because, and I'm not going to read the text. You should know it. Genesis 50 verse 20. When Joseph says to his brothers, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good, so that many people may be alive that are alive to this day." Excuse me. And of course, every time I read that, that's Revelation finds its ultimate, its apex, in the crucifixion of Christ, because it's very plain that the church, you know, says in Acts that you know, Pilate, the Romans, the Jews, all were they committed evil. They truly murdered the Son of God. And they will be held accountable for that unless they repent. But at the same time, Peter and the church, this is what a lot of churches don't like to tell you, is that that God had an intent. He intended them to do that. It says in Acts 2, Acts 4, Peter in his sermon at Pentecost, a section that most people like to leave out, that it was according to the foreknowledge of God that they were going to do this. And then in 4, it gets even stronger, that it just plainly says they were predestined to do this. They were predestined to murder the Son of God. All in according to God's purposes. God had that. It isn't as if Jesus comes along the scene, God's looking down and says, "Hey, look, here's a great opportunity right here. Jesus, go down right now." Son, there's none of that. And go, "Hey, look, this is our chance right here. Let's just do this. Let's see if we can get what we want to get done here. All those prophecies, we might be able to finally fulfill them. Those humans are finally doing what we want them to do." And then, you know, bam, there you go, crucifixion. It's not like that at all. God, the incarnation was always intended to happen at that moment in time. It was always part of God's plan. And so when I put all that together, I look back and I think what they did to the Son of God, as the Bible says, was horrible. It was evil, wickedness. They will be held accountable to it. It was the murder of the Son of God, the only true murder that ever took place, really, when you think about it. The only innocent man ever killed. And at the same time, I have to rejoice, because if he wasn't murdered, oops, sorry, YouTube notification, because if he wasn't murdered, I wouldn't have redemption in Christ. You wouldn't have redemption in Christ. None of us would. The gospel would have failed. So on the one hand, we must just, our hearts must break, be saddened of that event. But we cannot simply stop there. Because, you know, you look in the Psalm 22, 23, I think it's 22. When that's where Jesus is quoting part of it in the, you know, my God, why you have forsaken me. And of course, when you read on the rest of the psalm, right, what does it say? That he triumphs in full glory and all that stuff. It's victorious. So, you know, when you're just reading that first part of the psalm, if all you're doing is reading the first part of the psalm, all you have is despair. You got to keep reading to see what you get at the end. And what you get at the end is hope and victory. But that hope and victory was not attained until you, without first going through the first part of the psalm. But, you know, you can't have one without the other. And it's very important for Christians to recognize that, to see how God's power and glory is displayed in that moment in time. It's indescribable. It's strange. And then looking into our own lives that we can look back upon today, you know, a lot of times in the moments, you know, like in the crucifixion itself, all you saw in that moment was just sadness, the tears coming from your eyes about all of this, you know, especially the disciples. I mean, what was going through their mind? You don't really hear a whole lot about what was going through their mind, obviously. But what was going through their mind when they saw that? First of all, I abandoned my Lord. There's one thing. And secondly, all that hope, all the things we were doing the last 3 years. I mean, I thought this was it. I thought this was the end. This was the end of our distress, and our King was here, and then he's dead. He's dying on a cross now. I mean, so in that moment, all they had was sadness. But later on in life, obviously, they're looking back and they realize without that moment, I wouldn't be here proclaiming the gospel. What they meant for evil, God meant for good, so that many people may be alive. And surely in Christ there are many who live. They'll die in this life, but they won't die in the next, because of that horrible moment in time. And so I look today, like, I haven't been listening to a ton of Steve Dace because I love Steve Dace, but I've been sort of realizing that I've been taking the wrong approach to this entire coronavirus thing. And listening to Dr. White yesterday with Dr. Brown, yes, I learned something from Dr. Brown yesterday, listening to The Dividing Line. That as terrible as this whole thing is, and as frightening as it is, the uncertainty that is being produced, God's still in control all the time. And we can say that, right? I mean, we can say that really easily. We can say, oh, God's in control, God's in control, he's got it in control. But if we're just still going on Facebook and just hashing it out with people over your side versus my side on this thing, it's violating my Constitution, it's for the safety of everybody else, all this hashing it out and stuff, and if that's all we're doing, and all we're paying attention to is the numbers and stuff, are we really believing that God is so sovereign in all of this? I don't know. I can only speak for myself, and that's, I don't know if I don't think I was. And so taking this time, which is again time given to me in a way that was not ideal, um, but I have time now. I mean, I'm investing in hopefully in getting another job here pretty soon. But right now, I've been having a lot of time to just write and read stuff that I've been trying to get time to do for a long time, and just couldn't seem to find the time to do it. And here it is, and I'm now all I'm doing on Facebook is complaining about wanting to go back to the business, and not looking at what God has done in this, and then looking forward to what He's eventually going to do with this. Who knows? But like I said, at the same time that, you know, my future financial security is in jeopardy, at the same time I've been able to really just kind of read my Bible more thoroughly, and to write my novel more, and then to, of course, read. Like I said, I'm reading this. I mean, I've gotten this far in this book, which is saying a lot for me, and I'm just loving reading it. Today, well, the last week, I have to go back out there probably tomorrow. I'll do it. Our patio in the back was for like over a year. It was just filthy. It was just unattended, leaves, stuff, dirt all over, you know, and just muddy spots from all the rain that we had gotten over the past year or so. Just trash sitting back there, you know, old hoses that we don't use anymore. Just all sitting back there in this nice patio that we put together a couple of years ago. And you know, when we first made it, it was just really nice. You know, it was just nice and roomy. And then now it was just, well, last week I cleaned a lot of it up. Like I said, probably tomorrow, because probably not gonna have a lot of work tomorrow again. But probably tomorrow I'm just gonna sweep it up again, and then because yesterday, well, no, this weekend what I did was I spent a lot of time on Sunday raking up and just piling up leaves in the side of the house over here, which is, you know, it's just got trees all over it, and putting them all in our green. We have 2 green bins, you know, here for like, you know, organic stuff and whatnot, and I stuffed both of those up, and that wasn't even half of the amount of leaves that are still back there. So the trash guy came and he just dumped them all. So I'm gonna sometime tomorrow morning, go out there and just, you know, just do a little bit more. Probably not gonna get all of it, but just get a little bit more. Sweep up that patio again, you know, just keep it up and stuff like that. But anyways, I actually cleaned that patio, and so this morning, well, this sort of afternoonish time, I just took this book, grabbed a chair. It was like somewhere, at least it may have been like upper 70s, lower 80s, with a nice cool breeze. If you sat on it's one of those days where if you just sat straight in the sun for a while, you're gonna get pretty hot. But if you're sitting in the shade, you know, you get just the perfect balance. And we had this, again, the trees there just giving some really good balance. But I took a chair, just put it down there on the patio with all this, now it's just this open patio, and I just sat there and I just read this. Well, the dogs are running out there and just playing around, just reading this book, and it was just awesome. It was just great to be able to do something like that. Something that I haven't really been able to do. And I'm not saying that the reason the patio goes to crap is because, well, you know, I just got a job and I'm busy all the time. I'm not saying that, but with all the time to just kind of sit and just kind of like chill for a bit, you can just sort of look back and think, you know, man, you know, where did I go wrong? Kind of thing like that. And it's just, I'm thinking of it, like I said in my last program, trying to redeem the time. Like I said, I have something that's supposed to be coming in that's helping me get another job pretty soon. and I'm fortunate, or I'm blessed. I don't like to say fortunate. I'm blessed enough that over the past couple of years I've built up quite a amount of savings, so I have some cushion room to move around a little bit. So I'm blessed in that area. So I'm not in a huge hole right now. I mean, it's starting to sink a little bit, but it's not too bad right now. I still have a considerable amount of time. I would say at least a week before I have to start going, okay, I really need to get back to work. But in this time, I want to try and just do my best to do some serious reading, serious writing. And so, you might be thinking, Chase, you just spent like half the program complaining about, our rights being violated by this whole thing. Now you're saying, what are you saying, Chase? You're saying it's actually a good thing? Well, see, this is the thing. This is the thing I'm talking about. Again, go back to the cross. On the one hand, it was a horrible thing, and you have to keep pointing that out. And on the other hand, look what came out of it. It's just a strange way God works. It is truly, I can think of, oh my gosh, so many examples in history of evil things that were evil, but without them, good things couldn't have come. It is incredible to think about it. Genesis 50 verse 20, what you meant for evil, God intended for good, so that he may save many people who are alive to this day. Now, this obviously we're not talking about people being a bunch of people being alive to this day. Obviously, that's different. But the application being made there is God always means evil for good. And it's been really awesome. And again, like I said, at the same time, I am concerned about where we're headed. But nevertheless, I also truly believe God's using this for something good. And I want us to ask ourselves, I want you to ask yourself, you who have a lot of time in your hands right now, what are you doing with a lot of this time? Now, I do, I take some naps here and there. I've been staying up later than I should. And tonight, I really want to try, seriously, tonight, get to bed by 10 o'clock. Because I want to get up early. I hate waking up super tired and staying asleep till like 9. And that's like half the morning gone right there. And in the mornings when I have most of my energy to do stuff, it's when the afternoon time comes that I'm just like, oh man, I just want to go to sleep, and I end up playing a video game for like way too long. So I gotta really stop that here, and just try to go to bed by 9, 10 o'clock. So, but what can you do with the time that you have right now? That's something for you to answer. One of the cool things I've been seeing is a lot more people walking down, just taking walks. I took a walk on Sunday, by the way, a long walk. But I saw today I've never seen him before, a gentleman with, I would assume is his daughter, just taking a walk right here. And I've never seen that before. And I have a feeling it has something to do with this coronavirus. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that while this is a dark time, it's important for Christians to always be finding God working in it. What's God telling me here? What's God doing in all of this? Something to really consider. Like I said, this has been really enlightening for me. I wanted to talk about something that I learned about in this book, but that was supposed to go with my last subject, and I don't want to return to that because that would just kind of ruin the whole tradition of the show I've got going here by ending on a high note. I want to end on that note right there. I think I made my point pretty well, so I'm going to end it right there. Maybe I'll talk about the other thing that I've learned in this and in later episodes, because it was on the coronavirus thing again. But like I said, I don't want to go back to that right now. So, anyways, so I hope that's something that'll help you out and just sort of put things in perspective as it's done for me. You know, and just redeeming those times, you know, in these dark days. What's God doing? I don't know, but he's doing something. He's always doing something. He's always got a plan, and our job is to glorify him in everything, all to the praise and honor of his glory. Thank you for joining me here. This is Finding the Balance with Chase. God bless. Sola Deo Gloria. Bye.